Hey guys, I know it's been a hell of a minute since the last video. I do apologize. Just with what I do for work, I get really run down, really tired and lazy, and then I don't post my videos, which is not an excuse, but it does make things a little inconvenient. But here I am, dropping this new video. So again, I apologize. I thank you guys for sticking around and watching the videos, and I hope you enjoy them. For now, it's just a simple video. So let's get into it, and thank you again. Glad to see you beautiful bastards back from the warp. So we'll be reading another chapter from Leviathan in this video. Along with that, these are my tanks, my coral tank and my starfish tank. I'll grace you guys with this as I just kind of relax from having worked. And this is what I like to also do to relax besides paint the minis and read the books. I'll probably insert video of me doing a water change on my starfish tank. And then as I read, my beautiful coral tank will probably be behind me. But yeah, glad to see you guys back and hope you enjoy it. Cheers. So with all that being said, let's get into Leviathan. Chapter 18. Argentum Forest, Samnian Province, Regium. Storm speeders roared and lifted from the forest floor, summoning a cloud of leaves and a spray that as they rose through the through the branches. It was only as they broke through the forest canopy that Voltus realized it was now dark above the trees, as it was below. His speeder engines coughed and sputtered as he banked, and the navigational equipment chimed angrily, unable to come online. The tactical display in his helmet was equally shot, spitting fragmented data down his visor until he killed the signal with a blink. As the others circled around him, he stared out across the treetops. In any normal forest, they would have been able to plot a route with ease, using familiar landmarks to retrace their path. But the swell made that impossible. Even the sun was hidden, obscured by heavy darkness that had enveloped the planet.
Brother Apocryphy, Tenero's voice crackled over the vox. You have studied this forest in detail. What do you advise?
One moment, Sergeant. Voltus steered his speeder low, looping down to one of the hilltops that broke through the trees. Then, as he circled, he saw what he was looking for. In his first few weeks on Regium, he had cataloged the most common species of trees and made extensive notes on them. He had observed that moss only grew on the northern side of the trees that rose above the others. He used this fact to identify north and then flew higher, picking out landmarks that were southwest of his current position. He locked the speeder on that setting and roared off across the forest. Confident, he was now heading back towards Xerix. The other speeders fell in behind him. If we maintain this heading, we will reach the fortress, he said.
Are you sure?
Said Baraka, who was seated at his side.
The weather might have other ideas.
To the east, Voltus saw the familiar signs of a swell starting to form. The treetops were eddying like the wind-lashed pool. Those are only early flurries of a storm, he replied. We should outrun it if we hold our course. As the speeder accelerated, he glanced at the containment unit. The symbiont was thrashing and writhing, slamming against the armor-glass. As it flailed uselessly at its prison, he saw that it was watching him with its black, featureless eyes. The first specimen he studied had not been as intact as this one, and he was surprised to realize that the thing did not appear to be mindless. It looked malevolent, even calculating. and its eyes were not as blank as he had thought. There were shapes drifting across the tacky surface. Or were they lights? The speeder was locked on course, so he leant down, looking closer to the parasite's eyes. Vultus hunched over the mound of corpses. His arms and chest were slick with clinging blood, and his mouth was crammed with raw meat. The corpses were pilgrims. He had cornered them and torn them apart. They never stood a chance, not against him. He felt a wave of disgust as the thought that he was here, sunk low, feasting in the abyss. Something slammed into him, jolting the speeder sideways. The image of the feast was still large in his thoughts. And for a moment he could not grasp what was happening. He seemed to be in two places at once, two minds.
Fill your minds with reason, he said, using Castamon's words as a mantra. Leave no room for unnecessary. It worked. The lieutenant's logic shone like daylight into his mind, revealing the truth. Had the symbiote confused him? Had it invaded his thoughts? He remembered his talk with Abram in the laboratorium. If the thing was channeling etheric power, perhaps its leaders were nearby. Are you still with us, Luco?
Said Baraka, staring at him. There were klaxons sounding on the control panel, and the speeder was juddering. The roll bar next to him was buckled, as was the door, and he could smell smoke. Something had hit them while he was distracted. He looked outside and saw there were shapes darting through the shadows. He had made a study of local raptors, and none of them were large enough or demented enough to slam into a speeder. The shapes were only silhouettes, but the sinuous limbs and the bat-like wings were familiar. They were winged tyranids, of a kind he and Baraka had faced many times before. He took out his bolt pistol and tried to target one of the shapes. They loomed and spiraled as they flew, turning in the spores like scrapes in broth. He finally managed to get a bead and squeeze the trigger. Vultus. Baraka looked back at him through the darkness. Is that you? Baraka was running down the walkway, following the pilgrims. His armor was dented and smoking, and there was blood smeared across the blue ceramite. Vultus rushed at him, breaking his claws down. Baraka's back, tearing the power pack from his armor, sending Baraka tumbling to the floor. Baraka whirled around, bringing his combat knife up, but Vultus cast it aside. Baraka howled as Vultus began ripping through his armor and into his flesh beneath. Vultus cursed as he found himself back in the storm speeder. There were more alarms as the speeder was now shaking violently. Baraka had leaned over and grabbed the controls, struggling to hold their course. The air was full with promethium, fumes, and it sounded like anti-grav plates were about to tear loose, clinging and rattling to the undercarriage. A Tyranid hurtled towards them through the darkness. He fired, kicking it backwards in a flurry of wings, but more were diving at the speeder from every direction. Baraka gunned some of them down, but others flew on and thudded into the fuselage. They died as they hit, their carapaces exploding on impact, but he realized that that was their intent. They were using their bodies to destroy the speeder's fuel lines and grav plates. One of them latched onto the edge of the cockpit and gripped Baraka's arm with a claw, wrenching him sideways and tearing at his harness. Baraka grabbed at it by the head, snapped its neck, and hurled it into another Tyranid, sending them both tumbling backwards. Cries howled across the Vox channel as the rest of the squad struggled to pilot their speeders. Then Baraka grunted in annoyance as the control panel died under his fingertips. The klaxons ceased and the lights blinked out. leaving the whole interface inert. The speeder dropped, plunging towards the forest. Voltus thought fast as he was 100 feet up, and the crash would almost likely kill him and Baraka. Even if they survived, the containment unit would probably be smashed. He would never get a specimen back to his laboratorium. The thought of failing Castamon horrified him. He grabbed the control yoke back from Baraka, and to his relief, the speeder responded. It had no power, but he could at least direct the crash. Voltus thought back over the reports he had read. He studied the surrounding trees, estimated the distance he had left to travel, and decided on a plan. It was hazardous, bordering on reckless, but the alternatives left him almost no chance of survival. My engine is dead, he voxed. I intend to ride the swell. The rest of you, hold your current course. Ride the swell? Demanded Tenaro. Explain yourself. He fired a few more rounds, knocking back the nearest Tyranids, then banked the speeder hard to the right, sending it straight into a path of the storm. This is the only way, Sergeant. We will rejoin you at Xerax. Branches and leaves crashed as they surged forwards, catapulted by incredible force. Voltus' head jolted back as he hit the seat and heard the armor plating tearing from the wings. But the speeder held together. And rather than being dashed to the ground, it was hurtled forward, surrounded by a howling din. Baraka laughed savagely at his side. By the throne, he bellowed. The Tyranids tried to follow, but the moment they entered the swell, they were only torn apart by the whirling trees. It ripped into shreds and swallowed by the maelstrom of branches. Voltus steered towards the direction of the swell, minimizing the damage to its wings and fuselage, and letting the storm carry the speeder, gently and nudging the controllers as the branches eddied around him. The fuselage rattled louder as the speeder lost altitude. There was no sign of the Xenos now, but there was still a good chance the speeder would be torn apart before he could reach the edge of the forest. He tried the ignition again, but the mag plates remained silent. The tremors became so violent that the control panel cracked, exposing the frame beneath. There was so much debris lashing out into his face that Voltus struggled to see. But he had suspicion the trees were thinning out. Then he was sure of it. The speeder was approaching the edge of the forest. There was a shriek of tearing metal as more of the fuselage came away. Air howled through the exposed engine parts, and despite Voltus's efforts to keep the speeder level, it started to tilt. The left wing pointing gradually downwards. He battled with the yoke, conscious that his glide was about to become a spin. Then there was a loud clang, and they were free, shooting out across the fields in a moonlight grass. No, not moonlit. He realized they were lights flickering in the darkness overhead. He did not have time to consider the implications of that yet. Air roared through the ruined speeder as it rattled through the gloom. The controls were still threatening to send him into a spin, but he held the yoke firm, and the ground rushed beneath his feet up to greet him. Kept the wings level beside him. Barak was still laughing. Landing gear had been ripped away, so the speeder landed on its belly, jolting Voltus and Baraka against their harnesses, throwing up a wave of soil that drummed against them as they tore through the ground. After a few seconds, it came to a halt. The tail rose into the air and then slammed down, giving the Ultramarines one last jolt. Finally, there was silence. Grateful for those of you that follow along, come along for the videos and the story. This isn't as extravagant as Japan was, the last video there, but this is what I do on my off days along with creating some other stuff. But I hope you guys are enjoying me reading and enjoy just either listening to my voice. I know I'm not the best reader in the world, but the more I do it, the better and more fluid it should become. Yeah, I'm just grateful that some people pay attention to the videos, and I thank you guys very, very much. So with that being said, you could probably check out this video right here for one of the other chapters, and I'll drop a playlist of the Leviathan novel kind of right there. Other than that, peace, and I'll see you guys in the warp. Cheers.